So my definition of creative use of data is quite broad, and I think we saw that play out in judging. Sometimes it's just figuring out a deep insight on which you can build great creativity. Sometimes it's using the actual data in some type of visualization. Sometimes it's using the data to reach and create relevance to a certain group of people. So I think that's the broadness of the category. And in the end, everything we do in digital spaces is driven by data to an extent. So it's a broad church. Overall quality of the work I thought was really fun and really impressive. I've been lucky enough to see sort of the growth as data as a category in award shows, and it's gone from something where it was a bit of a stretch and sometimes very light to a really healthy initial long list and short list and very strong actual award. So it's amazing to see the leaps and bounds that this type of work has taken over the last few years. And it's laddered all the way up into real sort of material societal impact based on data and driven by creative. So it's really impressive to see how far it's come. If I look at the categories, what was sort of surprising or interesting, I thought there was some really beautiful data visualization work, which is a very narrow version of this category. It's almost sort of traditional data meets creativity work. But I thought some of the visualization work was beautiful. And it's always nice to still have some aha moments. There was even some work in there that didn't get awarded by jury that I thought had some amazing sort of visualization thought. Personal phase, I think the Grand Prix is for me such a great example of a company using its own data and then figuring out what that means and then making it relevant to culture and then making those messages sort of interesting. I thought that was just a hero case that I'm sure we'll see mentioned many times. So yeah, the broadness of it was interesting, but also just the some of the work that didn't win, I think, was outstanding. So personal North Star when it comes to awarding work, for me, it's always about, is this where I would want the category to sort of point to, right? You have to, which is always, I think, a risk at award shows. You get very enamored by an amazing piece of work and an amazing case. And then sometimes we over-index on how good the work is versus does it fit within the space that we're judging against. And that to me is really some of the most exciting stuff. Is there a piece of work there that just drives the whole definition of the category forward and becomes a milestone for other people to look at? And what I think was really fun today during judging is you saw the conversation with the jury sort of switch to that, right? It went from a piece of work that everybody absolutely loved, which I think was heading potentially for the Grand Prix. And then when we got into the weeds and started being about, but it's great work, we all see that, but is it great work within the context of what we're judging? You started seeing it move to other cases. And that's where the North Star sits, right? It's not just, is the work great? It's does it really push the category and become a milestone for that definition? So I think when I look at how tough or generous the jury was, I think it's interesting voting in these types of settings because there's a little less immediacy to the discussion and the reaction, which I think it can sort of play out a bit differently than you would have in the room. Not necessarily bad, but I think initially felt a bit generous just as people were getting used to the thing. But if I look at the distribution, how it ended up, I think it was super on point. And yeah, there was a healthy conversation about the work, which, I mean, in the end, as a jury, you have to be proud of the list that goes out. And I think we're definitely proud of the list that's going out. It's very strong. Yes, so Grand Prix, Reddit work up to vote. I think immediate favorite for a lot of people, but really came out on top because of discussion. And that was really where you saw a move from another piece of work that people loved, the Volvo work. To quote some other jury members, our work is not about saving lives. Oh, wait a minute, it is, right? It had massive, massive impact. And I think even at the scale it happened in the Netherlands, where I'm from. So it wasn't a massive sort of campaign or massive scale, but you sort of look at that and go, hey, that could be an amazing sort of future scale play for a company like Volvo as well. But is it the right piece of work to win a Grand Prix within a data category, right? That I think was the discussion, especially when you think about creative use of data. So that's where the discussion started to shift a bit. Finnish Water Index and Up the Vote really became the two strongest contenders. I think we all liked Unscripted. Unscripted being a sort of algorithmic data-driven script of the soccer or football season that was still to come. Beautiful piece of advertising, amazing way to sort of play with the concept of football can't be scripted. But that, I think everybody just loved the work, but saw it more as a way to leverage the conversations around data than the actual data. So you sort of saw that discussion go through that journey. Still quite a close vote between Up the Vote and the Finnish Water Index, but I think ended up in the place that we're all really happy with. Because I do think the Reddit work, maybe as an additional note, right, it isn't a for good organization, NGO. It's a very active social platform, community platform. There's a lot of pressure on those sort of technology spaces at the moment. And sort of come out with a campaign at that moment with that level of cultural relevance and be able to tie it back to your product messaging, I think is just is standout work. So my advice to people entering the category, it's three pieces. Really focus on the definition. I think in the early voting, so not so much the voting that we just went through for the actual awards, but at the longer list, good work, but some real sort of mismatches in category definition. So always focus on the category, make sure it really speaks to the category. I think the second piece is there's still a lot of creative opportunity out there that's a bit untapped, because so much of what's been sort of data in digital and data-driven in digital has been quite mechanic. To an extent programmatic and automated and algorithmic, and it's been underappreciated from a creativity perspective. So I think there's still so much space to just do groundbreaking work. And then the third part is I do always think the sort of data visualization space, I think always feels a bit light when you look at the amount of work that gets submitted. And that's maybe because agencies don't naturally play in that space, but I think there's a lot of great work happening industry wide, and I think sometimes people undersubmit when it comes to data visualization. So those would be my three beats.